how far has this loan been paid, and now what is now the procedure going forward? Do you need the consent from the bank to proceed with this transaction, or do you need to first discharge this charge before you proceed with that transaction? So there is an entire process, and I would explain it, the various methodologies of searches and due diligence, both at the lands registry, the county government, the private registry, and the court. And
we'll get to that.
Yes.
Just understanding with the whole land rates and how do you even look at it. And due diligence. I think we'll just throw that word out there. Where go and do your due diligence. But how exactly do you do your due diligence? And who is involved? We'll get to that. So, Thuku, in your case, as much as there's the whole standard procedure of this is the first thing. And najua ukipata na mtu uambie umeona shamba mzuri Thika Road, in the first thing. But practically speaking, nini inafaa ikuwe kitu ya kwanza kabisa when you buying land?
Thank you very much. And I think, as Wakili has said, I think after identification, being in this industry for a while, one thing I have realized is there's what appears on paper, but there's what appears on the ground. And I think one of the things that we advise is once you identify what you want to purchase, and of course through several means, it may be through an agent, it may be through a friend or whatever, when you get that, go to the ground. I think that's one of the things that we advocate, because there are some issues sometimes even before they get to the registry, before these encumbrances get to the ground, especially in areas where there are residents. Go to the ground and get to speak with the people around. Maybe they are neighbors. They know the owner. Because what happens is because of the rampant fraud that has been happening, sometimes you have the document. Sometimes people even will tell you, I did my search and everything was good in the registry. But there are stories that are there on the ground. There are people who know historical issues with that land. So what we do ourselves before we buy land, you go to the ground and engage the neighbors. Don't be in a hurry before even you do anything. First of all, get the history. There may be issues that are even brewing between, maybe if it's a family land, there's issues between family, but it has not gone anywhere. So the neighbors have the rumors. They know what is brewing. It may not have reached there. Because some of the issues that comes later. Some of the things catch up when you have already engaged into a deal. So I think part of what we have learned is that in the work of due diligence, there is an informal form of due diligence, going to the ground, speaking with the people there. They know the stories that are even not out there. So from there now, based on the confidence, they know the owner. Some of them will tell you, this land does not belong to this person. The owner died. The owner lives abroad. All those stories that are hidden somewhere. Because some people are left in charge of some land and then they are selling them. So I think that's one of the things that may be informal. It's not in paper, but I think it's one of the very important due diligence that you can start with. Going to the ground and speaking with the neighbors. Now from there, if you are certain the story of that, also insist of meeting the owner if they are around. Although, of course, some has been given over, maybe to our lawyers and the people who are in charge of disposing that land. But don't be very far from the owner. If they are available and they are in Kenya, you better pay the price. If they are very far, go and meet them in person. And be able maybe now to ascertain, get their ID even before going anywhere else, and also now correlate the ID and the person who is selling you land.
Right.
Of course, get the issues to do with historical issues to do with the family. Akona bibi wangapi, akona watoto wangapi, because those are things that will come up somewhere and they can hinder the whole process.
So picking up from both of you, it seems as if now identifying and then doing due diligence should be the first priority. But then now, so what are the different types of lands that someone should have in mind, Wakili? Because I understand maybe there's the residential, in case now, even for your own choosing, you probably want a residential, 3/4 acre, ujenge mahali vizuri. But someone maybe wants a whole acre, or maybe even 2 acres to set up a whole, commercial bit. So how do you identify this piece of land? You might see it, but maybe it doesn't really fit in with what the purpose of this land.
Thank you so much. Just to pick it from what my colleague has said, yes, various modes of due diligence. And apart from the searches, which I know it is the primary mode of investigation or due diligence. There are other modes of searches. One which he has mentioned, going to the ground and just ascertaining that that land truly exists. But how do you know the usage of this property? Titles, especially leasehold titles, have got that user section. When you look at the lease, there is the certificate of lease and there is the lease. The lease will entail the use of the property. Is it commercial? Is it industrial? Is it agricultural? So perhaps you wish to buy an agricultural land and you are looking at an industrial land. What do you need to do? For example, you are buying an industrial land and you want to do residential buildings in that property. What do? You now engage the owner and you explain to the owner that these are my intentions. And if those are your intentions, there is an elaborate process in law for change of user if you insist in buying that property. So you'll have to go through that process, and there will be normally this is a process that is conducted by the county government where the property is situated. So there'll be an application made to the county. The county will ascertain on whether the neighbors agree to the proposed change. The neighbors will be given time to respond to the proposed change, and that change of user will be effected. So it's very important to look at the user of the property or the use of the property as indicated in the title or as indicated in the lease. The other thing that I also wanted to mention.
So for example, you'd find, and I think I just have to use Thika Road again, because now using this hypothetical of this person who had the goal of buying land. So amepitia mahali Thika Road and seeing a very nice piece of land. It's probably an acre. Alafu iko kwa barabara tu hapo. So what should this person, what type of a land is this, Thuko? Is this because, you can tell us, are there types of lands that you can't have a residential there, or maybe a commercial? You probably wanted to start maybe a factory of, manufacturing some things, but then just around it, there are residential apartments and everything. So what should you have in mind? What are the ABCs of when you're buying this land? This is what you need to know.
All right. When it comes to utilization of land, there is the zoning laws. The physical department, the physical planning department of any county government has been able to zone areas. Zoning means this area has been set apart for this purpose, the utilization of this land.
Right.
And as my colleague was saying, there is the land that is set apart for residential, that you cannot do commercial. There are parts that have been zoned for commercial purposes, others for industrial, others are agricultural. So these use, because they are set there, then when you're buying land, I think you should have that prior information. Also, one thing that, as we are talking about due diligence, you also need to buy the map. Because sometimes there are land that you find is a land somewhere, but maybe there was a road cutting across.
You buy a map?
Yes, you need to go to the surveys of Kenya, buy the RIM. Yeah, that is the big map that you can be able to see the plot, the sizes, and the way, the dimension of that land, and also the shape. Because this is what you tell you, this land goes all the way here. Maybe there is a road that it had not been captured on the ground, but is there on the map. Some people end up buying land because I remember a case of someone who bought land, and later when Kenha was coming to demarcate their roads, half of his land was gone because it cut across. Yeah, but because it had been farmed over time, there's some part of the land that looked like it was a farm, but he had bought it already. So it's very important you buy, because if he had bought the map, regardless of whether someone had utilized the land, then he would have known how far the land was going, the dimension of the land. Right. So it's very important. Now, first of all, to get there, you are talking, for example, Thika Road, know the dimension. You can see Kenha is going all the way here, so here starts here. And then also when you combine that with the zoning, I'm able to know this area is commercial. However, there's a provision, as my friend has saying, about change of user. You can apply to change the use of that land. And the county government do the approvals, they are able to do public participation, and now they are able maybe to allow you to change the use of that place based
so where is that done, Wakili? And also, because you're saying buy this map. So they're following up this conversation. So okay, fine, and akununua map. But then they don't understand. Yes, agenda class is surveying, akafunzwa. This is what maybe this X means. This is what these lines mean. Is there someone who sits down with you and tells you, so this is your piece of land, this is what this means, this is what the size is?
Like I said, at the point of doing due diligence, actually that is the most crucial point in a land sale transaction. And you don't only involve an advocate. There are other professionals that will also be involved. One of such professionals is a surveyor. So you buy the maps. Actually, you could buy two maps. The map that shows the exact coordinates of that property, and there is another map that shows the overview of the property, the neighboring properties. After you get these maps, get a licensed surveyor, go to the ground, and you invite the vendor as well, so that one, you confirm that truly this land exists. Number two, whatever is indicated, the neighboring properties are in agreement with that which is in the map. If there is any beacon that is missing, then that beacon should be placed. Normally, if a beacon is missing, it is the responsibility of a vendor to actually replace such beacons. But the same can also be agreed upon between the parties. So it's very important to involve a surveyor. Number two, other than just involving a surveyor, taking you back to the due diligence stage, which I've said is it's actually the most crucial part. Because with a good due diligence procedure or process, you can claim bona fide purchaser for value without notice, should it turn out that the whole transaction was a fraud, which you did not take part and which you did not actually know. There are landmark cases. But you see, you can only claim that if you did your due diligence and you did it thoroughly, so that you knew that you are getting a legitimate and accurate title. So the other thing that you need to do is to do a search on the register. A search on the register is also known as the search on the green card. The green card shows the history of the property, from the time it was allocated, how it has moved to its current situation, to current status right now.
So this is where you go to the land registry website and search, or?
You could go to Ardhi Sasa if it's Nairobi, but mostly you write a letter to the registry to be supplied with the green card. Okay. So it's basically, in fact, after conducting the normal search, for me in my farm, I normally do the green card search and buy the maps. So that, one, I know that as per the official search, I know the owners of the property. Right. Is it a company? If it's a company, I need to go a step further to do a search on the existence of this company. Who are the directors of this company? Okay. Are there any debentures registered against this company? Right. I acquire their CR12. You see, then I can also go to the court registry and the Kenya law and search on any cases that may have been instituted against this company. Because especially for developers, there could be developers who initiate off-plan buildings, but they never complete them.
So the land registrar furnishes you with all this, whatever you're mentioning.
You write
on this green card.
Yes, you write a letter. Once you do a letter, the land registrar will issue you with a green card. Green card basically shows if, for example, if it was a land allocated by the government, when was it allocated? Then, assuming it was allocated to Mr. X, Mr. X sold it to so and so on this particular date. All of those entries, you'll find them in the green card search. So it's important to do the official search. Okay. It's important to do the green card search. It's important also to have a surveyor to come and confirm the existence of these properties and also to confirm the neighboring properties. Once you do all these things, then you can now be able now to talk. They say, I love what my colleague said, that when you are buying a property, one, you need to get information from the neighbors.
Uende kwa ground.
Once one person told me that one such person is a drunkard. They'll be able to tell you if there exists any feud. But that notwithstanding, there are latent defects and also patent defects. Okay. Patent defects are defects that can easily be seen. by ordinary due diligence or by ordinary vigilance. For example, who is in occupation of this property? Is it vacant possession, or are there any buildings in this property? But there are those defects that, especially in off-plan and apartments, there are those defects that you cannot be able to see by ordinary vigilance or by physical inspection. So it is also the duty of the seller. You can write a letter to the seller to give you any latent defects, that is unseen defects, or non-physical defects on that property. But again, you can also cure this during the agreement stage. You see, there is the due diligence stage. Once you ascertain the property is okay, you come now to the contract stage. And in the contract stage, you can include all these things in the warranties.
All right. So
that the seller gives you a warranty that this property is not within a buffer zone, there is no suit on this property, and this property, there are so many things. Then you come to the last thing, well, that I normally do. I normally engage the vendors. When I act for the purchaser, I would always want the vendors to sign an affidavit of title, an affidavit of clean title, to ascertain that they have, other than now just doing the searches, I would also want the vendor to confirm that they have a clean title by appending, their signatures on an affidavit of clean title.
So that means I have to be there, if I'm buying this land, I have to be there physically every single time.
No,
because someone's watching us, and I think now I'll have to change this hypothetical. So this is Stanley, and somewhere in South Africa, or maybe let's even in Kenya, whichever. And I saw on my socials, kaingia Facebook, kaona Home Point, wanakwambia, so there's this plot of land, and right now there are so many organizations and people buying and also, or rather actually even selling land and telling you, so there are this large pieces of land, you can buy them. But someone, because of maybe the state, whatever business they do, they can't really come to this piece of land that they want to buy physically. So what now happens in this? Because, well, as you're saying, and as actually both of you are saying, lazima ukuje kwa ground, uulize even the drunkard, by the way, na hapa kuna kuwa gaje. But you can't actually come to this. So that's the first one. The other one, you can actually come to this ground. But then you're coming to a ground where the next neighbor lives so many miles away from that place, so it's just, you're just seeing bushes and thickets and all that. There's no nearby neighbor to do. So does this now make the due diligence even harder?
Yeah, thank you. I think I'll start with the first question because by practice, because we have been practicing this for a while.
Yeah.
You realize some people are far, of course. One of the biggest source of diaspora remittance is when people are buying properties through their families and friends and through our learned friends here. So it's not a must that you be there, but one, the person who is acting on your behalf must have the power of, I don't know which word you use.
Power of attorney.
Power of attorney, to be able to act on your behalf. And it starts from a place of trust. And that's why most people use their family members or someone they fully trust. And this person, when they're acting fully on behalf of a person they are dealing on behalf of. And what they usually do, because we deal with them, they will send them the same process you do yourself. They will go to the ground, they will do all the whole process, but you're supposed to be in touch. However, when it comes to now the process of documentation, because nowadays there are many ways in which documents can be sent to someone, they can sign and be able to send back. So there is a process in which you'll be involved, especially in appending and authorizing, and if, for example, you are the one who is paying all those things, there is a correspondence that can be established between the person who is far. But when it comes to due diligence, someone does it on your behalf. But there must be a level of trust to this person acting on your interest. Because someone will come here and they go somewhere and they are told, wefanya hivi, akituma zile nitakupea zako. So it has happened, even in family members.
So that means a lawyer, for example, kama Simba hapa, hawezi kuwa the sole person acting on behalf of someone who is in diaspora.
No, he can't. That's what I'm saying. It also depends on the level of trust and how do you know each other. Yeah, because I cannot just call Mr. Simba here, I don't know, from South Africa. There's this land that someone is selling for me. You do it. You know, there must be a level of confidence that this person is acting on my interest, and therefore the lawyer will be involved. But there is a certain connection between the buyer and the person they are dealing with, who now deal with the lawyer on their behalf. However, I'm saying the issue of signing documents and things like that, you need to append maybe signatures. There is the issue of consent, because that one, someone need to go for land control board to obtain a consent for transfer, for example.
All right.
At the end of the day, there is what we call the special board. Although they are, I don't know whether they are in law, but they are now being considered to be put in law. But through the now a special consent, you can be able to get a consent even if you don't go to the normal board. But these people are able to act on your behalf. That's the first part. So someone can act on your behalf even if you're not there. But they must do the due diligence the way you would have done it. The other question I think you had asked was about...
I'm coming to this plot of land,
yes,
and it's all the way in Keserian, for example.
Yeah.
Wherever I want to buy this 1 acre of land, the next neighbor anaishi kutoka hapa hadi sijui wapi, hadi town ama wapi.
Yes.
You know, it's quite far. Yes. You know, that's the whole gist of it. There's no, because I mean, you're really saying do the due diligence and even ask the neighbors around there and, you know, people who frequent around this area. But then you'd find, so this piece of land, they're not, the population around there is very, ni kidogo sana.
Yeah.
Hakuna watu wa kuuliza hii maneno yote. So what do you do in this?
I think even the due diligence must also, the practicability of the kind of due diligence you're applying. We say if it's possible and if the neighbors are there, of course, it's very advisable to do that. However, there are also areas you go and you realize everyone is new. Everyone here, no one even know the historical aspect of it. So that's why now my learned friend here told us that they do the green card searches.
Green card search.
And when you do that, you can even be able to tell the person, before even it came here, it came from here, from here, from here. There are some lands that were schemes. Some of them, you like in around Vika Road, some of them are in Nyakinywa. Those groups that are there. They have their offices offsite, not in the registry. They have their offices. You go there and now do the historical aspect of finding who was this owner. This is the title. Is this the same guy who is selling me land? So I think now on that aspect, when the neighbors are not available, you'll have to rely mostly on the aspect of now the forensic search, that is according to the green card searches. And now from there, you'll be able to know the historical aspect of this land.
All right.
Yes.
So now the fact that we've established either you're in diaspora or you're in Kenya and you've actually seen this land, or you're using someone to acting on your behalf, umepatana, you know, getting even the agent. So now the big question people really want to know, I mean, we Kenyans are quite a creative lot. Sikianga unapitia mahali unatengenezewa kitu title deed nakaa safi sana, and it quite looks like an original one. Wakili, how do you, when you're holding an original title deed, how do you know this is actually an original title deed? Give us a visual aid of what a title deed should have, and what, when you, the first thing that ukiangalia title deed hivi, this is a fake title deed. And also, how many, let's say, types of title deeds are there?
Right now, let me start from, there's something that I wanted to mention before I get to your question. Okay. A power of attorney, for example, if you could be in diaspora and you want someone to deal with property in Kenya, you can give them a specific or a general power of attorney. General power of attorney gives them vast powers to act on your behalf regarding that transaction, including payment of the purchase price and even signing documents. Specific can be specified that I need you only to do this, but not signing the documents. So if you have a power of attorney and it is registered, you can even actually sign on behalf of of a party in a land sale transaction. Remember, any contract in disposition of land has to have 3 things as per the Law of Contract Act and the Land Act. It must be in writing, it must be executed by the parties, and number 3, there have to be witnesses. A witness can be your friend, your neighbor, or even an advocate who can attest that document. Let's now get to the question you have posed right now. What happens when I hold a title? First, You know, with your due diligence, you'll be able to know who is the owner of this property.
Okay.
And of course, you can also look at the ID. Because there are many times that the problem is with the ID. Someone fakes an ID of the owner of the property, and they also go and get a land title of the owner of the property, the fake ones, and they bring those documents to you. So in real sense, could be you've seen this the IDs that get lost and titles that get lost, so someone can easily come to you. So the first thing you can also do a formal letter to the registrar of person to confirm if this ID really belongs to the said person, because IDs are very unique, with unique serial numbers, and there is only one ID that relates to a person. So if you do that, you can be able now to ascertain that indeed the person who is indicated as the owner of the property is also the person who is in the ID. That is number one. Number two, you look at of course, the title has various sections. There is Part A, which is the property section, the proprietorship section, and the encumbrance section. Okay. Of course, then every title must be signed by a registrar, and then it must be sealed. So you look at the registrar, which registrar signed this title, and you go and search that registrar, because there is, if you search, there is an index of all the registrars in Kenya. You can easily ascertain that this is actually a registrar who really exists. Then, of course, I remember there's a time someone came with a fake title, and by looking at it, looking at the registrar, we smelt a rat, and immediately we did our search. It's unfortunate that the client came to us after paying huge amounts of deposit, but at least we were able to salvage a bigger part of the balance of the purchase price, because now we had to involve the DCI. We just called them to the office because we already known that these are fraudsters. And the police came and they were carried away.
So on that bit, because that's where I really want, and largely, because I remember last week on Friday, Cabinet Secretary of Interior, Professor Kithure Kindiki, said the government will now start to crack down on fraudsters. And we've had this conversation for years on end. You know, fraudsters this, fraudsters this. So, Thuku, help us understand, because we've enlisted all this, nice process, may simplify vizuri. But at what point, mostly, do fraudsters come in? Or will the fraudster come in? Because someone would say, maybe there's bidi lifanya due diligence yangu yote. Nikaenda nikapata na watu wa bodaboda hapa, kanilea hata lunch, nikauliza hii shamba iko aje. I asked, I had all those, the green card information. I searched probably on land registry, but then still, nikaambiwa, something just happened. So at what point, normally, will the fraudster come into play on all this process?
All right. I think there's just one thing I want to mention, and I think what you learn over time is that document someone holds, and especially the one we call title deed.
Yeah.
For me, I don't consider it the actual title deed. The title deed is the green card in the registry. There are fraudsters who are able to do all those things. You try to look at it, it looks exactly. They are able, over time, these fraudsters are always ahead, and they are able, maybe they can be able to fool you.
So there's no way you can duplicate the green card information?
No, unless now, that's where I'm going. And I think most fraudster works in cahoot with the people in the registry.
Okay.
Yeah, because for you to go and do search, and the search is clean, and even some, because most of the people who have been defrauded have a clear search. I did there's no encumbrance, there was nothing, and I did it, and it was signed by the registrar. What has been happening historically has been issues to do with, one, people who know the history of that land. For example, I may have a neighbor who I know lives in the States, and therefore he's not around, and I know he'll take some time. So what I will do is that this land, I know the story about it, I know the person, so I'll go to the registrar, and they go to the registrar, those fraudsters, and they'll tell the registrar, those, of course, not all registrars, and tell them, now we have this land. It's worth 10 million. You take your 5, I'll take my 5. So let's do this. This is the document. This is what. You make a green card. The seller is coming. And what they used to do, because there are sometimes we encounter such kind of a story, or someone will go, the registrar will remove the original green card. Insert another one, it is written. So when you go to do the search, that moment it will be very clear. So it is a very clean green card. Then once you leave after the search, it is removed and the other one is returned.
Wow.
Yeah, when the original one is returned, even if you go back there to say, after you have been defrauded, I did search here. When they go to look at the green cards, they will be telling you faked. That search is not ours. Look, come, you can see, this is the original green card. However, so for you to be able to do that, it must be done at that high level. There must be collision between the fraudsters and of course people in the registry for you to have done all the due diligence and then only for it to end up being a fraud case. So it has to involve those people at that level. And I think we thank the government because there is the ADISASA that is, and I think it's taking a long time to be effected everywhere. But I think it's something that can solve some of those issues.
Why do you think it's taking a long time?
No idea. No idea. You know, sometimes things are government. I don't understand why it has taken that long.
Is it probably the fact that people onboarding into digitization and people not really understanding this?
No, you see, that one is not, it's not being done by common, it's not us out here. There are people in the registry who are supposed to take this document and put them in a digital space. But I think there is also some people out there who may feel they are not done with the deals they are doing and this system is up. There are things that are not be able to complete. But I'm just speculating. I don't know why. We were thinking it would solve a lot of issues if it is up and running. Because you can even see, if you do a search, it leave a lot of digital footprint that you can, even someone nosing around someone's product, you can be able to know.
You can tell. Yeah. All right, back to buying land. And we've had different hypotheticals of you in Kenya and umepatana at the seller, or rather you in diaspora. But now, and this really happens a lot, because the first hypothetical was just someone with their own will. But then now you'd find in different circles, so they tell you, so we're buying this piece of land. It's a huge acre, probably 5 acres. So sisi ndo tutanunua. We'll do everything for you guys. So, and we'll give you the title deeds later. So we're going to buy this 5-acre piece of land somewhere in Kitengela. Inakaa safi vizuri. Hadi mnapanda bus all the way, road trip, mnaenda mnaangalia. Mnaona iko sawa. Nyinyi mnarudi. So now the SACCO, or probably this, let's say, organization does all this for you. Now, so tell us, so what's the legal process? Is it different from when it was an individual? Is it different from, let's say, when it's a SACCO or a group of people? And how then does it work? Because at the end of the day, so this, let's say there were like 10 people. At the end of the day, kama ni 5, wote walikuwa nataka wagawe, it was subdivided, let's say an acre each. How does that work?
Before I answer that question, there's just one point I wanted to just bring home. That when, for example, on the due diligence, when you conduct a search and it turns out that there was a collusion in the registry and it's a document that emanated from the registry, you can be indemnified because it is their document bearing the stamp, the government stamp, so that you can be indemnified on that. That's where the bona fide purchaser for value comes in.
In simple layman's term, indemnified is...
can be compensated.
Or compensated. Okay.
You can sue the registrar.
Okay.
Yes, because if it's a document that they stamped, provided it's stamped and it's emanated from them, and you can sue them. That aspect now comes with the bona fide purchaser for value, which I think we'll explain at the end of the show. But now we are now dealing with a very critical issue where individuals come together to acquire property. One, you need to understand there are 2 ways through which a property can be co-owned. A property can be co-owned as joint tenants. You can co-own it as joint tenants. When you buy it as joint tenants, it simply means that your interests or your shares in that title are not specified. And should one of you die, the others will take over your share in that property, and it will not even go to your beneficiaries. So you have to understand, are we acquiring this property jointly? Number 2, you can acquire it as tenants in common. When you acquire it as tenants in common, it simply means that your shares are defined. So out of the 5 acres, all of you would be in the title as proprietors, and your shares will be well indicated, so that should one of the co-tenants die, then that property, that bit of the property or that share of property will pass through their beneficiaries by way of succession. So you need to get legal advice on that aspect. Number two, you also need to understand when you are buying it, for example, as a society, as a company, or as a welfare, is this welfare duly registered? Does it have a constitution? If it has a constitution, how is property acquired pursuant to the constitution? Mostly it's by way of trustees who own this property on behalf of the welfare, the foundation, or even society, foundation, or any other organization other than a company. So it must also be stipulated in the constitution of the welfare. It must also be indicated in a memorandum of understanding. Perhaps we decide, the three of us, we want to buy a property, and after buying that property, we shall divide it. We could also have a memorandum of understanding between us that it could not be the land purchase agreement from an individual. It could just be the two of you or the three of you agreeing that after buying this property, this is how we shall proceed to divide it. You'll take this portion, and you'll foot this percentage of the purchase price. So those are things that you must agree prior to acquiring land jointly or as tenants.
Let me take you back to the bit of you saying that. So, for example, these 5 individuals are in a circle, and they're going to buy land, a 5-acre piece of land, somewhere in Kitengela. And because you've told us, so one of them passes away. So is it the 4 who now decide how we're going to subdivide this 1 acre yenye aliacha? How does that work? And then, because this one person would want the family, obviously, to inherit this one piece of land. And whatever, so this person decided to do with this land, kama ni agriculture, familia yake iendelee na hii maneno yote. So how can this person involve the family? Because you're telling us. So it goes now to the co-owners and the co-tenants. So how does the family get involved as well to also own this? How can this person involve the family?
So that's why it's important to get legal advice when you are acquiring property as co-tenants. Or one, you have to ascertain on which aspect you'll be owning that land. Is it as joint tenants or tenants in common? And I would advise you, if you are not dealing with your relative or your spouse, in that case, go for tenants in common. Because tenants in common, it will ascertain the shares of each individual. So that when you die, or if you die, God forbid, then that share, that part of your property will be subjected to succession. But if it is joint tenancy, that property will automatically go to the rest of the surviving tenants by a doctrine known as jus accrescendi or survivorship. So normally we advise that mode of ownership, joint tenancy, it should be among spouses. Because you see, spouses, you have the same beneficiaries. So that when I die, it will go to my wife. Or when my wife dies, it will come to me. And still it will devolve to my beneficiaries.
Right.
But if you decide to own it as joint tenancy in a group of people that you do not really relate to, then that is how you lose your interest when you die. Number 2, you can as well choose to subdivide it before you die. You can choose that this is what we want to do. We now want to subdivide so that each one of us has his own title. And in that case as well, you also involve an advocate and a surveyor, and you do your subdivision, and titles will be processed now that every individual will have their own titles.
Right.
Yes.
Gentlemen, I'm seeing we have quite some few minutes before we wrap it up. And when we started just taking a look at what should be the first thing someone should be thinking about. And I love the fact that both of you talked about the due diligence as well as identifying this piece of land and the whole purpose of it. So you've gone through this whole process. So what should be now the final steps? You've identified everything is good. Umepata title deed. The green card is okay. Thuku, so what should be the last things to do? The final steps of actually doing when you're now buying this land?
All right. I think the almost final steps to go through is one, through that's the work that my Irish friend here does, work of conveyance. Now you sit down, you do an agreement, you put in a deposit. And this deposit also shows it is in effect for a period of time, maybe 90 days. I paid this, we are starting this process now. We are of engaging and buying this land. After putting in the deposit, it dictates the balance, how long it will take before you finish it. And in this time, this is the time now you need to obtain what we call the consent from the Land Control Board of the district, through the district this headquarters.
Just a minute before you go to the whole control board,
yes.
Because you talk about the whole deposits, and I think this was something that I should really have asked both of you earlier. Now the pricing. So who dictates the pricing, by the way? Is it because you told us now there's also the agent who helps both of you, the buyer as well as the seller, or is it the seller ukikuja unakuambia hii makuta iko hapa Thika Road iko karibu na barabara, so leta $2 million. How does all that sale agreement happen?
No, there are several factors that influences the price, but I think at the end of the day there is the valuer. There is another player that we not mentioned.
Okay.
His name is the valuer. He's one that usually sets and of course dictates the value of a place. However, there is also the seller who sometimes maybe there is a medical issue, there is an emergency, and sometimes the prices based on the circumstances that are dictating the sales, then you can be able to negotiate. But the baseline is set by the valuer, and also the prevailing condition in a certain place. There are areas that you find maybe based on the demand that is on the ground there and what is being done there. Today, like for example, we saw the other day in Embu, there is coltan, there is some minerals that maybe were discovered, and through that, now of course what will happen is that the price is based on the demand, and of course the speculation of what is there may make it go up very fast, maybe even beyond what was projected, because of course there is the growth in terms of value of a place. But there is something that may come up and make the area just explode in terms of
So what happens? So what happens? I'd love to also pick your thought on this, even in the legal perspective. So what happens in such a situation? Because let's say there was a violation done 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and no one knew that up and ndani kuna some minerals or something around here. And then years later, something emerges and you'd already, let's say, bought this land, and now you probably want to sell it, and you're in that whole process. So what happens in such kind of a situation?
So there are duties of both parties in a land sale transaction.
The buyer and the seller.
There is the duty of a buyer and there is a duty of a purchaser. Perhaps the buyer may be aware that there are minerals. If he is aware that there are minerals and the vendor does not know, he is required by law to disclose.
Okay.
And that can be a ground. Someone can bring that as a ground to actually claim for more money. That is if you knew. But again, now let's go back to the setting of the price.
Yeah.
There is freedom of contract. You can choose whichever amount you want to sell your property, provided you can agree. But when it comes to the payment of stamp duty, the government valuer has to do the valuation. And after doing the valuation, it is through that value that you will proceed now to pay stamp duty, which will also depend on the location of the property. If the property is within a municipality, it's 4% of that value. If the property is outside a municipality area, it's 2%. And let's say rural area, it's 2% of the value of the property. So many a times, advocates will leave that place blank, because you may have agreed with because of the bargaining power and the agents who are involved. The agents want to draw commissions from this sale. Perhaps the property is 3.8 million. And when it goes to, that is from what is in the agreement, it's 3.8 million. But when it comes to the actual value, it's like 2.5 million. So you will pay stamp duty based on the valuation of the property by the government valuer. But you are free to agree on whichever amount. That is something I needed to mention just very fast.
Briefly, yes.
Briefly. You need also to understand the financial implications when you are dealing with a land sale transaction, because parties are bound by the terms of the contract. And there is a leading case law that the court does not rewrite that contract. the court only enforces the wishes of the parties.
Okay.
So when you agree that this is the purchase price, when you agree that this is the completion period, you need to be advised by your advocate that without doing it within that stipulated time, then that would amount to a breach of a fundamental term of the contract, which can be enforced against you. But there is always a remedy. Maybe because of one reason or the other, you may fail to complete as per the law or as per the contract.
Okay.
You can always write to the other party for extension of that completion period.
Right. And even as you also give us your final thoughts, Thuku, so what really happens in the control board, the land control board, matters now clearance as we finalize this conversation?
Yeah, I think the land control board at the district level just comprises of the administration, government administration, the person from the land registry, and of course locals, based maybe elders and chiefs and people like that. They are the people who know the historical aspect of this land. They know this is the owner who is selling. We know their children. So it's just to ascertain that this transaction is above board and is legal to proceed with this and this. And there have been an agreement even at the family level and stuff like that. So their work is just to ascertain that, and then they physically see these people, for example. They see this is the vendor, this is the buyer. But the weight is on the seller, because he's the one that you want to ascertain that what is being done is above board.
Naturally, okay, finalize before I ask you.
Yes, now after they have established that, it's minuted, then from there you are given what we call the consent. And this consent is the one that now, together with the transfer documents that are processed by the lawyers and the original title, they are submitted to the registry, to the registrar.
Right.
And the registrar is only allowed to effect the transfer of the title if the consent is given. So there is that synergy of working between the consent, the board, and of course the registry.
Naturally and briefly, how long should all this, from buying all the way to actually finalizing, naturally, how long should it take?
It depends, because as they're saying, it's a willing seller, willing buyer. So you can agree how long you want to do that. But at the end of the day, I think the nature of the agreement, from the time you put in the deposit to the time you have agreed, you finish payment within this period of time. I think within that period, the transaction should be done.
Fantastic. Yes. Wakil, your final thoughts?
It's one thing to acquire land. It's another thing to protect it from fraudsters.
Okay.
There is the restraints in disposition of land. There is the caution, there are restrictions, and there are inhibitions. And maybe you can pick that next time. Allow
me to close it at that, gentlemen. Peter Simba, lawyer, as well as Dominic Thuku, CEO of Home Point Investment, as well as Vice Chair, Real Estate Stakeholders Association. Yes. Asanteni sana. Back at home, I hope you've learned a lot. This conversation continues online. You can follow them on the socials. Peter?
Peter Simba Wasaga on Facebook. And then you can also visit our website, Peter Wasaga and Company Advocates. You can also reach us through our number, which is in our website.
Your socials?
Home Point Kenya, and also Home Point Investments.
Right.
To get us, our website and also our socials.
You've definitely got it. You can reach out to them in case you felt like he probably answered this question, but then I really needed to dig deeper and understand. Maybe makosa ilifanyika and you defrauded. You really want to understand, so how can you really pick it up? You can reach them out there. This conversation is where we wrap it up, matters legal processes of buying land. Back at home, pahali huko, as well as say every single Thursday, anza sasa kutafuta your sport shoes and some space, because after this short break we're getting into matters upper body and just fitness Thursday. Stick around for that conversation. I'm yours truly, Stanley Nyeringita. Kwa heri kwa sasa.